The morning sun glinted off the polished metal of jets at Metro International Airport as Commissioner Grace Washington made her way through the crowded terminal. Dressed in casual clothes, jeans and a simple blazer, no one would guess she was the highest-ranking police officer in the city. She preferred it that way today, her observant eyes noting security lapses out of professional habit as she waited for her flight home after the law enforcement conference. Across the airport, Alexander Reynolds III adjusted his pilot's cap and flashed a practiced smile at the flight attendants who greeted him as he exited the cockpit of the London flight had just landed. The Reynolds Air logo on his chest perfectly matched the one on the tail of the aircraft, a constant reminder to everyone that he wasn't just any pilot. He was Reynolds Air royalty. "Excellent landing, Captain Reynolds," cooed a senior flight attendant, her admiration transparent. "When you've logged as many hours as I have, Janet." "Excellence becomes routine," Alex replied with practiced charm, though his eyes were already scanning the terminal for more important matters. A young boy approached, clutching a model airplane and a pen. "Mr. Reynolds, can I have your autograph? I want to be a pilot just like you someday." Alex's smile widened as he crouched down. "Of course, buddy. Maybe someday you'll fly for Reynolds Air." He signed the model with a flourish, his perfect white teeth gleaming under the terminal lights. Without breaking his smile, Alex simultaneously barked at a ground crew member inspecting the aircraft. "What's that smudge on the forward fuselage? Do you think my father built this airline for people like you to make it look second-rate? Have it cleaned before my return flight, or find another job." The ground crew member nodded silently, used to the air's temperament. It was common knowledge among staff that Alex flew the airline's most prestigious routes not because he was the most qualified pilot, but because his last name granted him immunity from the consequences of his behavior. Complaints about his conduct were routinely buried by management. As storm clouds gathered on the horizon, an announcement echoed through Terminal C. "Attention passengers. Due to approaching severe weather, all departures are currently experiencing indefinite delays. We apologize for the inconvenience and will update you as more information becomes available." A collective groan rose from the waiting passengers. Commissioner Washington approached the gate counter calmly, unlike the angry travelers crowding around the overwhelmed agent. "Excuse me," Grace said quietly to the agent. "I understand you don't control the weather. Could you please tell me what information you do have about the expected duration of the storm system?" Before the agent could answer, a commotion drew everyone's attention. Alex Reynolds strode through the terminal in his crisp pilot uniform, parting the crowd like a modern Moses. He was scheduled to pilot the return flight to London, and whether delay or not, Alex Reynolds operated on his own timetable. "This is ridiculous," he announced loudly, pushing past Grace to reach the counter. "I've flown through worse than this. Get the ground crew ready. We're boarding in 20 minutes. The gate agent swallowed nervously. "I'm sorry, Captain Reynolds, but the control tower has issued a weather hold. No exceptions for any aircraft." Alex's jawline hardened. "Do you know who I am? My name is on the plane you're hoping to board. Call the tower and tell them Alexander Reynolds is ready to fly." Have you ever witnessed someone who believed their status placed them above the rules? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you're ready to see what happens when entitlement and prejudice collide with justice, subscribe now and ring that notification bell. This story of accountability is just getting started. The crowd around the gate desk thickened like storm clouds gathering outside, with passengers pressing forward demanding answers about their delayed flights. The gate agent, a young woman named Melissa, tried maintaining composure as she repeated the same information. "I'm sorry, but the control tower has issued a weather hold for all departures. We'll update you as soon as we receive more information." Commissioner Grace Washington stood quietly to the side, observing the growing tension. She understood the frustration. These were people with connections to make, meetings to attend, families waiting. But she also knew safety protocols existed for good reasons. Alex Reynolds had no such patience for protocols that inconvenienced him. He pushed through the crowd, his pilot's uniform commanding immediate attention and respect he hadn't earned. "This delay is completely unnecessary," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, positioning himself as the voice of authority. "I've flown through weather systems twice this size. The airline is just being overly cautious because they don't want the liability." Melissa, the gate agent, tried to interject. "Captain Reynolds, the control tower has specifically stated. Begin the boarding process." Alex cut her off with a dismissive wave. "They'll take full responsibility. Reynolds Air doesn't leave its passengers stranded over a little thunderstorm." A murmur of approval rippled through some passengers, grateful for any movement after hours of delay. Others exchanged concerned glances, understanding that weather delays weren't arbitrary decisions. Commissioner Washington stepped forward, her voice measured but clear. "Excuse me, but isn't that contradicting established safety protocols? The control tower makes those determinations based on comprehensive weather data." Alex turned slowly, sizing up the woman who dared question him. Taking in Grace's casual clothes and calm demeanor, he immediately dismissed her as unimportant, a critical error in judgment. "And you are?" he asked with thinly veiled contempt. "A concerned passenger," Grace replied simply. Alex's lip curled. "Well, concerned passenger, do you know who I am? My name is on the plane you're trying to board. I think I understand aviation safety better than you do." The passengers around them had gone quiet, sensing the charged confrontation. Someone raised a phone, beginning to record. "Your name on the aircraft doesn't override the authority of air traffic control," Grace stated, maintaining her professional composure. "Weather safety protocols protect everyone aboard." Alex's face flushed as he realized others were watching. Worse, some were nodding in agreement with this woman. "I've been flying commercial jets for 12 years, he snapped, his voice rising. "I think I know when it's safe to fly." "Then you understand the importance of following proper channels and authorities," Grace countered. "No pilot, regardless of experience or family connections, has the authority to override a control tower directive." More phones appeared, recording the escalating exchange. Alex noticed and became increasingly agitated, and used to having his authority questioned so publicly. "You people always think you know everything," he spat, the words dripping with disdain. "Maybe you should know your place instead of questioning someone like me." A collective intake of breath followed his comment, the racial undertone unmistakable. Grace's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened. "By you people, what exactly do you mean, Captain Reynolds?" she asked quietly. The terminal had grown eerily silent now, the earlier complaints about delays forgotten as passengers watched the confrontation unfold. Nearly everyone had phones out, capturing every word. "I mean people who don't understand how things work in the real world," Alex backpedaled unconvincingly. "People who don't respect the chain of command." Interesting choice of words about respect and chain of command, Grace noted calmly. "So to be clear, you believe you have the authority to override air traffic control because your family owns the airline?" Alex's composure cracked entirely. The questioning, the recording phones, the way this woman refused to back down. It was all too much for a man who had never heard the word no. What happened next occurred so quickly that some witnesses would later disagree about the exact sequence. Alex Reynolds, pilot and heir to Reynolds Air, stepped forward and violently slapped Commissioner Grace Washington across the face. The sound echoed through the terminal like a thunderclap. Grace's head snapped to the side from the force of the blow. Shocked gasps erupted from the onlookers. "He just hit that woman," someone shouted. Blood trickled from Grace's split lip, a crimson line stark against her skin. Yet she didn't flinch or cower. Instead, she straightened her posture and maintained unwavering eye contact with her attacker. Alex, perhaps surprised by his own action but unwilling to show weakness, smirked at the crowd. "Now, does anyone else want to question my judgment?" The silence that followed was electric with tension. Grace slowly wiped the blood from her lip with her thumb, examining it briefly before reaching into her bag. "Actually, I do," she said, her voice steady as she pulled out a badge and identification card. "Commissioner Grace Washington, Metropolitan Police. You're under arrest." The transformation on Alex's face was immediate, shock replacing smugness as comprehension dawned. Before he could fully process this revelation, airport security officers who had recognized the commissioner rushed forward. Grace didn't wait for their assistance. With practiced precision, she spun Alex around and slammed him against the counter, pulling his arms behind his back. "Alexander Reynolds," she announced in a clear, authoritative voice that carried throughout the terminal, "you are under arrest for assault, battery, hate crime, disorderly conduct, endangering public safety, and interfering with airport operations." The handcuffs clicked shut with finality as security officers moved in to help restrain the struggling pilot. Alex's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "You can't do this to me. Do you know who I am?" he shouted, struggling against the restraints. "You have the right to remain silent," Grace continued, unperturbed. "I suggest you use it for once in your entitled life. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." As security officers took firm hold of Alex's arms, he continued to struggle and protest. "This is ridiculous. You can't arrest me. My father owns half this city." The passengers, who moments ago had been frustrated by delays, broke into spontaneous applause as Alex was led away. Grace maintained her professional demeanor despite her bloody lip, nodding briefly to acknowledge the support. Airport security personnel, initially uncertain how to handle the situation, snapped to attention when they recognized the commissioner's rank. "Commissioner Washington, we have a private office where you can process this," offered the security chief, suddenly deferential. Across the terminal, phones buzzed with notifications as videos of the incident uploaded to social media platforms in real time. #PilotSlap and #Commissioner Washington began trending within minutes. In the airport security office, Alex demanded his phone call with the entitlement of someone who had never faced consequences. "I want to call my father. Now," he shouted at the security officers. Across town, William Reynolds sat at the head of a polished conference table during a Reynolds Air Board meeting discussing quarterly projections. When his phone rang showing his son's number, he excused himself to answer. "Dad," Alex's voice was a mixture of anger and panic. "Some angry black woman is trying to arrest me. Fix this now." William Reynolds felt a familiar sinking feeling, the same one he experienced every time his son created a problem he needed to solve. But something in Alex's tone suggested this problem might be beyond even his considerable influence. Have you ever witnessed someone face unexpected consequences for their actions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're captivated by this collision of privilege and justice, hit subscribe now to see how this dramatic confrontation unfolds, and what happens when a lifetime of entitlement crashes against the immovable wall of accountability. Within an hour of the incident, the videos had spread across every major social media platform like wildfire. The hashtags #PilotSlap and #Commissioner Washington dominated trending lists nationally, with view counts climbing into the millions. The footage, captured from multiple angles by stunned passengers, showed the confrontation in high-definition clarity. The entitled pilot, the calm questioning, the shocking violence, and finally, the moment of revelation and arrest. William Reynolds' sleek black Bentley pulled up to the airport's executive entrance, where airport management waited nervously to escort him inside. He moved with the confident stride of a man accustomed to solving problems with his checkbook and connections. Throughout his son's life, William had been there to clean up Alex's messes, from schoolyard bullying incidents that were smoothed over with donations to the private academy, to the drunk driving charge that mysteriously disappeared from court records, to the harassment complaints from flight attendants that never made it to HR. As he was ushered through a back corridor to avoid the gathering press, William glanced at his phone where the viral video played on repeat. The image of his son striking a woman, now identified in news cheerins as Metropolitan Police Commissioner Grace Washington, made his stomach tighten. Even he might not be able to make this disappear. "I created this entitled child," William muttered to himself, shaking his head as he watched the clip again. "All these years of protecting him, and this is the result." Outside the airport's main entrance, news vans had assembled with remarkable speed. Reporters stood before cameras, breathlessly recounting the incident while passengers who had witnessed the confrontation lined up eagerly to give their accounts. "I was standing right there," a middle-aged woman told a CNN reporter, her eyes wide with the excitement of unexpected celebrity. The way he spoke to her, like she was beneath him, it was disgusting even before he hit her. And then when she pulled out that badge, I've never seen someone's face change so fast. He literally said you people should know your place before he slapped her, another passenger recounted to MSNBC. Everyone knew exactly what he meant by that. The racial undertone was unmistakable. On social media, the story expanded exponentially. Clips of the slap and arrest were edited, remixed, and shared across platforms. Commentators dissected every second of footage, analyzing Alex's expression, Commissioner Washington's composure, the reaction of bystanders. Within hours, digital sleuths had assembled comprehensive biographies of both the entitled pilot and the badass commissioner involved. As Alex was transferred from airport security to police headquarters, a gauntlet of cameras captured his journey from the building to the police transport vehicle. His handcuffed wrists and furious expression featured prominently on every news website within minutes. Inside the airport's administrative offices, William Reynolds requested a private meeting with Commissioner Washington. After a 15-minute wait that he found unusually disrespectful, He was escorted to a small conference room where Grace Washington sat reviewing paperwork, a butterfly bandage on her split lip the only indication of the assault she had experienced. "Commissioner Washington," William began with practiced charm, taking a seat across from her without waiting for an invitation. "I want to personally apologize for my son's inexcusable behavior. He's been under tremendous pressure lately, though that's no excuse for what happened." Grace looked up from her papers, her expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Reynolds, I appreciate you coming, but am not sure what you hope to accomplish here." William leaned forward confidentially. "I understand these situations require delicate handling. I'm prepared to make this right." He removed a checkbook from his jacket pocket. "Perhaps a generous donation to the Police Benevolent Fund? Or a personal compensation for the distress caused. Name your figure." "Your son committed assault on camera, Mr. Reynolds," Grace stated flatly. "Money won't fix this." William's smile tightened. "Commissioner, we both know how these things work. I've known Mayor Thompson for 20 years. We play golf every month. And Chief Daniels and I serve on 3 charitable boards together." "Call them," Grace replied without hesitation. "They'll tell you the same thing. The law applies to everyone, Mr. Reynolds, even to people named Reynolds." Across town at Reynolds Air headquarters, the company's PR team had assembled in emergency session. Social media monitors displayed real-time analytics of the growing crisis. Hashtag Boycott Reynolds Air had emerged as a secondary trending topic, with consumers publicly pledging to avoid the airline. "We're seeing cancellations coming in at unprecedented rates," reported the VP of Customer Relations, scrolling through data on her tablet. "First-class bookings are down 70% in the last hour alone." As if on cue, the chief marketing officer's phone chimed with an email notification. "Anderson Consulting just canceled their corporate account. That's over $12 million in annual business travel. Their message cites incompatibility with corporate values and specifically references today's incident." On the trading floor, Reynolds Air stock had begun a steady decline as the markets reacted to the viral scandal. Financial analysts were already projecting the potential impact on quarterly earnings. At the Metropolitan Police headquarters, Alex Reynolds sat alone in a holding cell, still believing this was all a temporary inconvenience that his father would resolve. His expensive suit was rumpled, his pilot's wings pin confiscated along with his belt and shoelaces as per standard procedure. "Do you know who's in there?" A desk sergeant whispered to a colleague, nodding toward Alex's cell. "That pilot who slapped Commissioner Washington. The video's everywhere." In the adjacent holding area, several other detainees who had been scrolling through social media on contraband phones recognized the new arrival. "Hey, ain't you that rich boy pilot who hit the lady cop?" called out one man, attracting the attention of others. "Not so high and mighty now, huh?" The hostile atmosphere grew as more detainees recognized him, some making threatening gestures or explicit comments about what happened to woman beaters behind bars. After 2 hours that felt like 2 days, William Reynolds was finally permitted to see his son. The contrast between them was stark. William still immaculately dressed in his bespoke suit, Alex disheveled and diminished by his surroundings. "Tell me you fixed this," Alex demanded immediately, showing no gratitude for his father's presence. "This is ridiculous. She provoked me, anyone could see that." William studied his son with new eyes. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The entire country has watched you assault the police commissioner. It's everywhere, Alex. So, buy the footage. Sue the people who posted it. Do whatever you normally do." Alex's voice rose in frustration. "That's your job, isn't it? To protect the Reynolds name?" "There are at least 30 different videos from 30 different angles," William replied evenly. "This isn't going away. The airline is already suffering. Stock is down, bookings are canceling, corporate accounts are jumping ship." "That's not my problem," Alex scoffed. "The company can weather a little bad press." William stared at his son in disbelief, finally seeing the monster he had created through years of enablement and protection. "You really don't care, do you? About the company, about the employees whose livelihoods depend on it. About anything but yourself." "Why should I?" Alex shot back. "You've always taught me that Reynolds men are different, that we're above the petty rules that govern everyone else. Now suddenly you want me to care about consequences?" The words hit William like physical blows. "I didn't raise a son," he said quietly. "I created a monster who thinks the world owes him everything." As father and son faced this painful truth, William's phone buzzed repeatedly with urgent messages from board members. Major sponsors were pulling advertising contracts. The pilots' union had issued a statement distancing themselves from Alex's behavior. The FAA had announced a review of all safety complaints related to Reynolds' air operations. Meanwhile, investigative reporters had begun digging into Alex Reynolds' past. By evening news, reports emerged of previous incidents that had been quietly resolved. A harassment claim from a flight attendant who received a settlement with a non-disclosure agreement. A drunken altercation at an airline industry event that never made police reports. Complaints from ground crew about unsafe demands that were buried by management. Former employees, emboldened by the day's events, began speaking to reporters about Alex's pattern of abusive behavior and the company culture that protected him. One mechanic, who had been fired after refusing to clear an aircraft that Alex wanted to fly despite maintenance concerns, provided emails documenting the safety violation and subsequent cover-up. The empire that William Reynolds had spent his life building was crumbling around him, all because he had failed at his most important job, raising his son to be a man of character. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm clouds that had gathered both literally and figuratively over Metro International Airport the previous day. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and curious onlookers as Alexander Reynolds III was escorted inside for his arraignment. Gone was the crisp pilot's uniform that had once given him an air of authority. Instead, he wore an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him, his usual confidence replaced by visible unease. Inside the courtroom, Judge Eleanor Martinez presided, a veteran of the bench known for her no-nonsense approach to justice. When the charges were read, assault, battery, hate crime, disorderly conduct, endangering public safety, and interfering with airport operations, Alex stood with his shoulders slumped, a posture unfamiliar to a man who had spent his life strutting through the world. Bail is set at $1 million, Judge Martinez announced, her gavel striking with finality. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The amount was extraordinarily high for the charges, but Judge Martinez had made her calculation carefully. The Reynolds family reputation for making problems disappear through financial influence was well known in legal circles. If money was their tool, she would ensure it was expensive enough to make an impression. William Reynolds sat in the gallery, his face impassive as the figure was announced. When Alex turned to him with expectant eyes, William did something unprecedented in their relationship. He made no move to help. The message was clear: Alex would spend at least one night in county jail. Across town, Commissioner Grace Washington sat with District Attorney Marcus Chin, reviewing the case details. Her split lip had begun to heal, but the incident remained fresh in the public consciousness, with the video having been viewed over 50 million times in less than 24 hours. "We need to be careful here," Grace stated firmly. "I want no special treatment, neither harassment because of who he is, nor leniency because of his family's influence. This case needs to be textbook justice, Marcus. The public is watching how we handle this." Chin nodded his agreement. "The evidence is overwhelming. Multiple videos, dozens of witnesses, and your own testimony. But the Reynolds legal team will be formidable." "Let them come," Grace replied. "The law is clearer than they are." At Reynolds Air headquarters, the board of directors had convened an emergency session. The company's stock had fallen 18% by market close, corporate accounts were fleeing, and public sentiment had turned decisively against the airline that had once been the crown jewel of the industry. "We need decisive action," urged the chief financial officer, presenting projections of continued losses if the situation remained unaddressed. "This isn't just a PR crisis anymore, it's an existential threat to the company." As night fell on the county jail, Alex Reynolds found himself in a 6x8 cell, the smallest space he had ever been expected to occupy. The sounds and smells were alien to him. The thin mattress, nothing like the luxury accommodations he was accustomed to. For the first time in his life, his name opened no doors, bought no favors, erased no mistakes. In the darkness of that cell, something shifted within him. The carefully constructed facade of superiority began to crack, allowing the first glimmers of genuine self-reflection to penetrate. Who was he without the Reynolds name? What had he actually accomplished on his own merits? The answers were uncomfortable. Morning brought William Reynolds back to the jail, but not with the expected bail money. Instead, he requested a private conversation with his son. Seated across from Alex at a scratched metal table in the visitation room, William looked older than he had just days before. "My father raised me to believe the Reynolds name made us special," William began, his voice low. "He taught me that rules were for other people, that our money and position entitled us to different treatment. And I passed that toxic legacy directly to you, without ever questioning it." Alex stared at his father, and used to this kind of vulnerability from the family patriarch. "I failed you, Alex. I failed as a father by protecting you from consequences instead of teaching you responsibility. I failed as a company leader by allowing your behavior to poison our corporate culture. And now, we're both paying the price for that failure." Across the city, Commissioner Grace Washington stood before assembled officers of the Metropolitan Police Department, addressing the events that had thrust their department into the national spotlight. "What happened at the airport wasn't about me," she told them, her voice steady and clear. "It was about the principle that no one, regardless of their wealth, status, or family name, stands above the law. Each of you wears that badge as a promise to uphold justice impartially. Sometimes that means confronting power and privilege. Sometimes it means standing your ground, even when it's difficult or dangerous." The officers listened with rapt attention as Grace continued, sharing briefly about her own journey. The discrimination she had faced rising through the ranks, the colleagues who had told her she didn't belong, the supervisors who had questioned her qualifications despite her exemplary record. Those experiences had forged her commitment to equal justice, a principle she would not compromise, even when the pressure was most intense. 3 weeks later, Alex Reynolds stood before Judge Martinez again, this time to enter his plea. The courtroom fell silent as he spoke the word that would have been unimaginable weeks earlier: guilty. As part of a negotiated agreement, Alex was sentenced to 500 hours of community service, mandatory completion of sensitivity and anti-racism training, and 2 years of probation. The sentence was neither the harshest possible nor a mere slap on the wrist. It was proportionate justice, applied without fear or favor. On the same day as the sentencing, William Reynolds called a press conference at Reynolds Air headquarters. Cameras flashed as he approached the podium, his expression solemn but resolved. "Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO of Reynolds Air," he announced to audible gasps from the assembled press. "Our Chief Operations Officer, Victoria Chun, will assume leadership while the board conducts a search for permanent replacement." William continued, outlining comprehensive reforms for the company: new anti-discrimination policies with actual enforcement mechanisms, a scholarship fund for minorities pursuing careers in aviation, and a commitment to rebuilding the corporate culture from the ground up. Reynolds Air was founded on the principle of connecting people across distances, William concluded. But we lost sight of the human connections that make those journeys meaningful. Today, we begin the process of earning back your trust. At a ceremony honoring her service, Commissioner Grace Washington received a standing ovation from colleagues and community members alike. Her handling of the Reynolds case had solidified her reputation as a leader of unwavering integrity, committed to justice regardless of circumstance. 6 months after the incident that changed both their lives, Alex Reynolds began work at a new position, not as a pilot, but in ground operations for Reynolds Air, learning the business from the bottom up rather than the entitled position he had previously occupied. The sensitivity training he had initially resented had opened his eyes to perspectives and experiences he had previously dismissed, planting seeds of genuine change in fertile soil. William Reynolds found unexpected purpose mentoring young people from underserved communities, sharing hard-earned wisdom about character and responsibility. Lessons he had learned too late to spare his son the public fall from grace, but perhaps in time to help others avoid similar paths. And as for Commissioner Grace Washington, she continued her work with the quiet dignity that had characterized her response throughout the ordeal. On a flight to a law enforcement conference, she boarded a Reynolds airplane and was greeted with respectful recognition by the crew, not because of viral fame, but because of the integrity she embodied. The story of Alexander Reynolds and Commissioner Grace Washington reminds us that accountability is not the enemy of redemption, but its prerequisite. True change begins only when we face the consequences of our actions and choose a different path forward. Have you ever witnessed someone undergo a genuine transformation after facing consequences for their behavior? What made the change seem authentic rather than merely performative? If you found value in this exploration of accountability, privilege, and the possibility of redemption, subscribe now to receive more stories that challenge our assumptions and inspire thoughtful reflection. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come from watching someone's world collapse and seeing what they choose to build from the ruins.